The fire was still burning when a neighbor arrived carrying proof that he had been somewhere else. Rodrigo Ferreira da Silva walked toward the devastated property with a printed gym record in his hands, offering an alibi before investigators had formally accused him of anything. Only a few steps away, inside a smoke-blackened home, firefighters had found 23-year-old Jaqueline Novais do Vale, her 11-month-old son Marcos, and the unborn child she was carrying. The flames had damaged the rooms, soaked the floor with water, collapsed furniture, and covered the original scene beneath soot and debris. It looked as though the most important evidence might already be gone. Rodrigo had scratches on his body, insisted that he had been working out, and voluntarily agreed to provide DNA as the cooperation itself could prove innocence. Then, hours later, while he was still being questioned, his sister entered the bedroom of the disabled mother and noticed a black garbage bag hidden beneath the bed. Inside were baby clothes and a small blanket marked with what appeared to be blood. The clothes belonged to Marcos. In that moment, the fire stopped looking like the end of a tragedy and began looking like the final step in an attempt to erase one. But the bag beneath the bed would reveal something the flames could not destroy. A trail leading directly from the burned house to the man who had arrived, carrying an alibi. On November 28, 2018, emergency services were called to a residential fire in Grajaú, a densely populated district in the southern region of São Paulo, Brazil. The property was part of a shared compound, a common urban arrangement in which several modest homes stand on the same parcel of land, connected by narrow walkways, staircases, and small common areas. To reach the lower section, residents descended a staircase leading to 3 houses built close together. One belonged to Jaqueline, her husband, and their 11-month-old son. Another was occupied by a neighbor who was reportedly away at work. The third belonged to Rodrigo Ferreira da Silva, a 30-year-old man who lived only a few steps from Jaqueline's front door. When firefighters entered the damaged home, they expected to confront the aftermath of a domestic fire. Instead, they discovered evidence that the flames were not the beginning of what had happened there. Jaqueline and Marcos were found inside, and the condition of the scene suggested that violence had occurred before the house began to burn. Jaqueline was pregnant. Contemporary reporting described her as being approximately 5 months into the pregnancy. What first appeared to be an accident was now a suspected homicide involving a young mother, an infant, and an unborn child. The first specialists at the property were focused on the fire itself. Serious residential fires are examined for patterns that reveal where the flames began, how they traveled, and whether the cause was electrical, accidental, or deliberate. Heat, smoke, water, and emergency activity can destroy fingerprints, damage DNA, move small objects, and alter a room before homicide investigators ever arrive. But fire is not a perfect eraser. Burn patterns can reveal more than they conceal. Protected areas may preserve biological material, and injuries can show that violence occurred before the flames spread. Once the engineering team recognized that the scene could not be explained as an ordinary accident, local police were notified, and the case was transferred to São Paulo's Department of Homicide and Protection of Persons, commonly known in Brazil by the initials DHP. Because Marcos was an infant, investigators connected to the unit responsible for crimes involving children and adolescents also became involved. By the time homicide specialists began examining the property, the house had been transformed. The rooms were wet, dark, and damaged. Smoke had blackened the walls. Heat had changed surfaces that might once have carried fingerprints or biological traces. Yet the investigation did not depend on recovering one perfect clue. It depended on reconstructing the sequence of events from whatever remained. Investigators photographed the rooms, documented the positions of objects, searched for possible ignition points, and considered whether anything had been removed before the fire. They examined entrances, pathways, and the relationship between the homes in the shared compound. Who had access to Jaqueline's house? Who knew the family's routine? Who knew when her husband left for work? Who could move between the residences without immediately attracting attention? These questions directed attention toward the people closest to the scene, not because proximity proves guilt, but because access and opportunity are essential parts of any reconstruction. Rodrigo lived within steps of the victims. He knew the layout of the property, he knew the household, and while investigators were still trying to understand the scene, he appeared carrying a printed record that seemed designed to answer the most important question before anyone had asked it. Rodrigo told officers that he had been at the gym. According to forensic professionals who later recounted the investigation, he produced a printed workout record and presented it as proof of his location. A gym receipt or attendance record can help establish a timeline, but it does not automatically show where a person was before arriving, how long the person remained, or whether someone else could have used a membership card. Investigators also noticed scratches and other minor injuries on Rodrigo's body. Those injuries did not prove he had attacked anyone. Scratches can have innocent explanations, but when combined with his proximity to the victims, his rapid presentation of an alibi, and the signs of violence inside the house, they required documentation. Police searched his residence, but did not immediately find a direct link to the killings. Rodrigo denied involvement and agreed to accompany investigators to the DHB. He was asked whether he would voluntarily provide genetic material so that it could be compared with evidence recovered from the scene. He agreed. That apparent confidence may have been genuine, or it may have reflected a belief that the fire had destroyed whatever could connect him to Jaqueline's home. Rodrigo was also taken to the Institute of Legal Medicine, known in Brazil as the IML, where forensic professionals could document the injuries on his body and collect biological samples under controlled conditions. Meanwhile, detectives continued interviewing witnesses and processing the burned residence. Hours passed. The fire had occurred during the day, but the investigation extended into the evening as teams moved between the property, the police department, and the medical examiner's facilities. Then the police station received an unexpected call. Rodrigo's sister had gone to the home of their mother, a woman described in the later forensic account as diabetic, physically disabled, and without legs. While inside the bedroom, the daughter noticed a black garbage bag concealed beneath the bed. Its placement was immediately suspicious. A person with severe mobility limitations might not easily discover, reach, or remove something hidden in that location. When the sister opened the bag, she found small items of clothing, including baby clothes and a blanket, marked with what appeared to be blood. She contacted police and told them that her brother was already being questioned in connection with the fire. The discovery changed the direction of the investigation immediately. The most important evidence may not have survived inside the burned house, but someone had carried the evidence away before the flames consumed it. Investigators went to the mother's home, photographed the bag where it had been found, documented the clothing, and collected the items for laboratory analysis. The location mattered almost as much as the contents. The bag was not found in a public area, in a trash container, or somewhere along a road. It was hidden beneath a bed in the home of the suspect's mother, only a short distance from the crime scene. If the items belonged to Marcos, they create a physical bridge between the victim's home and Rodrigo's family. But investigators still needed to identify the clothes and confirm the nature of the stains. Laboratory results would take time. The fastest person who could recognize the items was the man who had just lost his family. Jaqueline's husband had lost his wife, his infant son, and the inborn child they were expecting in a single day. In the middle of that shock, investigators needed him to look at the clothing found beneath the bed. According to the later account of the case, he recognized the items as belonging to his son and family. His identification did not replace scientific testing, but it gave the evidence immediate meaning. The clothes had been removed from the burned residence and carried into the home of Rodrigo's mother. The husband was brought to the police station so that the identification could be formally recorded. Then the recovered items were shown to Rodrigo. Until that moment, he could claim that the scratches were unrelated, the gym record supported his movements, and the fire had nothing to do with him. The bag made those explanations far more difficult to maintain. It suggested not only contact with the victim's home, but also an attempt to hide evidence after the attack. Confronted with the clothing, Rodrigo confessed, but even the confession did not resolve the case, because his first version was structured to protect himself and damage Jaqueline. According to forensic professionals who later discussed the investigation, Rodrigo claimed that he and Jaqueline had been involved in a secret relationship. He said that the unborn child was his and that they had been preparing to reveal the affair to their spouses. In his account, an argument over their supposed relationship escalated. He killed her, and he later started the fire without realizing that the 11-month-old Marcos was still inside. The story attempted to transform an attack inside Jaqueline's home into a private conflict between two adults in a consensual relationship. It also placed the responsibility on the victim by portraying her as unfaithful and emotionally involved with the man who killed her. Because Jaqueline was dead, she could not deny the allegation. Her husband, already grieving 3 losses, was left facing a confession that attacked her memory and questioned the paternity of the child she had been carrying. A confession is evidence, but it is not automatically the complete truth. Suspects may admit responsibility while lying about motive, sequence, intent, or the actions of the victim. They may minimize crimes, conceal sexual violence, protect accomplices, or offer a version designed to reduce punishment. Investigators therefore continued testing Rodrigo's account against the physical evidence. The claim that he was the father of Jaqueline's unborn child could be examined scientifically. DNA samples were compared. According to the later forensic account, the result excluded Rodrigo and confirmed that Jaqueline's husband was the father. The genetic evidence did more than disprove one detail. It dismantled the central explanation Rodrigo had offered for why he was inside the house and why the violence began. The alleged affair was not supported by the paternity claim he had used to make it appear credible. As investigators continued confronting him with inconsistencies, a different account emerged. Rodrigo later admitted that he had waited until Jaqueline's husband left for work, entered her home, and attempted to force himself on her. Jaqueline resisted. The violence that followed was not the result of a mutual relationship collapsing. It was an attack by a neighbor who knew the family's routine and took advantage of the moment when she was alone with her infant son. This distinction mattered in every possible way. It changed the motive, the legal understanding of the crime, the interpretation of the scratches on Rodrigo's body, and the meaning of the lie he told afterward. His claim of an affair had not been a harmless attempt to explain a confusing relationship. It had been a strategy to reduce his responsibility and transfer humiliation onto the victim. Without the DNA evidence, that false story might have remained attached to Jaqueline's name, repeated in reports, discussed by strangers, and carried by her husband for years. After the attack, the house was set on fire. The exact purpose could be understood through the surrounding evidence. Flames could destroy biological traces, damage the interior, create confusion, and make the deaths appear connected to an accident rather than deliberate violence. Rodrigo later claimed that he did not realize Marcos was inside, but investigators had already seen his story change when evidence contradicted it. They could not accept that statement simply because it was included in a confession. The presence of baby clothes in the bag showed that someone had interacted with the child's belongings before the fire or before leaving the scene. The clothes had been gathered, removed from the house, transported to another residence, and hidden beneath the bed of a woman with severe physical limitations. Each of those actions required a decision. The hiding place was not random. It relied on proximity, family access, and the expectation that investigators would focus on the burned property rather than search beneath a bed in another home. The sister's decision to call police became one of the most important moments in the investigation. She could have remained silent, she could have ignored the bag, removed it, or waited for her brother to return. Instead, she contacted authorities while Rodrigo was still being questioned. Her call allowed investigators to recover the items before they could be moved again. The husband's recognition gave the clothing immediate context. Laboratory analysis could then compare biological material from the items with the victims. The bag connected the physical scene to the suspect, while the DNA testing contradicted the motive he tried to invent. The scratches on his body were documented. His gym record became only one piece of a broader timeline, rather than a shield against every other fact. What Rodrigo had offered as proof of innocence could not explain why his family home contained bloodstained clothing from the victims. This case demonstrates why homicide investigations are rarely solved by one dramatic revelation. The fire scene alone was damaged and incomplete. The scratches alone could have been accidental. The gym record alone might have appeared reassuring. The bag alone needed identification. The confession alone contained lies. But when the evidence was examined together, the structure of the crime became visible. A neighbor knew when the husband left. A young mother resisted an attack inside her own home. Violence occurred before the fire. Evidence was removed from the residence and hidden nearby. The suspect arrived with an alibi already in hand. He volunteered DNA, perhaps believing there was nothing left to find. When confronted, he confessed, but attempted to redefine the victim as a willing participant in a secret relationship. Then forensic testing contradicted him and restored the truth he had tried to erase. Contemporary reporting identified Jaqueline as 23 years old and Marcos as 11 months old. They were not abstract names in a case file. Jaqueline was a young mother, building a family and preparing for the birth of another child. Marcos was still an infant, dependent on the adults around him for safety. Jaqueline's husband had known her for years and had come to São Paulo with her in search of work, stability, and a future. In a single attack, he lost his wife, his son, and the unborn child they were expecting. He then had to participate in the investigation, identify his child's clothes, hear the killer accuse his wife of infidelity, and wait for DNA evidence to defend her memory. The justice system could not restore his family. What it could do was establish what happened, reject the story created by the offender, and preserve the truth in a form that could be presented in court. The black bag beneath the bed became more than a container of clothing. It represented a mistake made after the violence, when the offender believed he still had time to decide what investigators would and would not find. Someone had removed the baby's belongings from the house, carried them to another property, and placed them where a disabled woman was unlikely to discover them easily. That act revealed planning, movement, and consciousness of evidence. It also created a trail that the fire could not erase. The trail moved from Jaqueline's home to Rodrigo's body, from his body to the medical examiner, from the mother's bedroom to the police station, from the clothing to the grieving husband, and from the confession to the laboratory. Every stage reduced the space available for another lie. Jaqueline did not cause the violence committed against her. The child she carried was not Rodrigo's. The evidence did not support the secret relationship he described. Marcos was not merely an unseen detail in an accidental fire. They were a family attacked inside the place where they should have been safest. The most damaging part of Rodrigo's first confession was not only that it was false, it was that it attempted to recruit the victim into the explanation for her own death. Forensic evidence prevented that accusation from becoming the final version of her life. The fire was supposed to leave investigators with ashes. Instead, it left a pattern, a neighbor who appeared with an alibi before he was accused. Scratches that required explanation. A DNA sample offered with confidence. A sister who found a bag beneath a bed. Baby clothes that should never have been there. A husband who recognized them. A confession that changed when the evidence became impossible to ignore. And a genetic test that spoke for a woman who no longer could. The fire was supposed to erase everything. It did not. This is the Unquiet Archive.